Good morning, and thank you so much for having me here today. When Allison asked me to talk about this topic, I thought I would probably have some ideas for everyone. So I sat down and I quickly wrote about 20 instances of places where I'd made mistakes with male colleagues. Unconsciously, I had just underscored one of the key differences between males and females at work. We tend to doubt ourselves more, question our competence, focus on our mistakes, and undersell our performance. In many ways, we've been bred to do just that. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm married to John and a mother of 2 boys, Isaac, who's 8, and Grayson, who's 6, as well as a pretty cool dog named Emma. They're my guiding star, my bedrock, and they're the lens through which I filter all my career decisions. I most recently led strategy and M&A for Kimberly-Clark and have done a lot of strategy and marketing roles over the years. While I was just talking, how many of you thought, I wonder how she does it, raises 2 boys and succeeds in a big job? How many of you thought, her job doesn't sound all that big, I wonder why they have her talking to us? And if there are any men listening right now, research shows that some of them are probably thinking, there's no way her job gets the best of her time and energy with all of those responsibilities at home. Is she really committed to it? Women in business are much more likely to get the feedback, you talk too much about your family and people worry about your commitment, even though they're no more likely to talk about their family than men. One researcher interviewing same-sex females in the workplace, where one pair had the career lead and then there was a stay-at-home as well, they're still likely to receive this feedback. That can leave many women feeling like there's not a good choice. Either embrace who you are and suffer the consequences at work, or compartmentalize your life but risk labels like cold and distant, or sometimes even worse. In business school, I took a negotiation class from a young female professor who I thought was fantastic. She poked fun of herself regularly, telling stories like about the time she went to the market planning to negotiate the chicken she was buying, and then she ended up chickening out and just paying full price. She made negotiation approachable for me, something that it was okay to fail at, and something that I was much more likely to give it a go at in the process. I remember particularly enjoying a part of one of her classes when I looked over at a male friend of mine who was shaking his head in disgust. Afterwards, I asked him what that was about, and he said, how am I supposed to learn anything about negotiation from someone who's so bad at it? The professor had lost some of the class with her approach and done a huge service for others. I would argue that you can effectively do both. Show both vulnerability and confidence. Our professor could have stated what she was doing, sharing the failures more often than the successes because there was more to learn from them. What if I had introduced myself this way? Most recently, I was Chief Strategy Officer and a member of the executive leadership team at Kimberly-Clark. In my career, I have founded a startup, led marketing for a divisional spinoff and IPO, and consulted for McKinsey. My husband, John, and I have 2 boys, Isaac and Grayson, who I love to mention because they're the reason I strive to be the best at what I do every day. Talking about the differences between men and women can be challenging because we're far more alike than we are different. We're also individuals. I know plenty of women who are ambitious and aggressive and take no prisoners, as well as men who are reluctant to speak up or lack confidence. Today, I'm going to talk about a few things that I've observed that are differences between men and women on average, and things in particular women fail to do in the workplace. This is also through the lens of my own experience. So they just happen to be things that I've failed at in the past, and I'm trying to do better. Okay, so first, recognize that bias against women is unconscious. It would help to believe that any bias is unconscious, even if it wasn't true. When we believe a system is keeping us down, we are much less likely to act against it than if we believe our own behavior is keeping us down. McKinsey & Company, the consultancy, understands this concept well. It's full of these overworked high achievers who use complaining as a form of venting. The mantra at McKinsey is to make it your McKinsey. When I complained that the lifestyle wasn't friendly or that we needed to connect more to our people, I was asked, what are you going to do to fix it? This can be exhausting, but it's also highly empowering. I do, however, happen to believe that the vast majority of bias against women in the workplace is unconscious. We just have to fight a socialization process that starts at birth. There are oodles of research reports that highlight differences in how different genders are treated in primary education. Boys are much more likely to be called on than girls. They're more likely to be praised in the classroom, and they're more likely to receive extra attention. Girls, when praised, are praised for being neat, quiet, and calm. By 6th grade, girls rate being viewed as popular and well-liked significantly more highly than being independent and confident. Boys value competence and independence. Assertive behavior in girls is viewed more negatively, with words like bitchy applied. This socialization plays out in the workforce, where women are significantly less likely to desire the C-level, less likely to change jobs for career advancement, and less likely to ask for promotions and raises. My 8-year-old son goes to a high-quality school in the Atlanta area. When my husband and I walked into the room to meet the teacher before school started, she immediately approached me to be room mom. I told her I have a pretty big job and I don't think I can commit to it, and so she just pressed me harder to accept. She never even considered asking whether my husband could help out. She's a fantastic teacher on so many dimensions, but I have a hunch Isaac is receiving subtle clues on differences between men and women. The beauty of bias being unconscious is that it's not as hard to shift as you might think. I studied abroad in London for a semester during college. I had played soccer for my university, and I was missing it while I was over there. So I decided to go and join into one of the intense pickup games that men gathered to play in Hyde Park. I asked how I could get into a game and was told to stand over there with the subs and someone will call you in. Well, there were only a few of us, and everyone was getting called in but me, sometimes several times over. During a stop in the play, I decided to call out to the players, hey, you may not have known that I want to play, but I'm trying to get in the game. Kind of embarrassed them into doing something, so the next player to come out called me in. And I have to say, I earned their respect pretty quickly out on the field. They invited me for drinks at the pub afterwards and made me promise to play with them every week. Their assumption before I played was that I wouldn't be good enough. Once I proved my competence, they seemed excited to have me on their team. At McKinsey, women were offered the chance to attend something called gravitas training. The theory was that women were seen to have less gravitas because of the way they interacted. In essence, it was an acting class. We were taught to take up more physical space when we talked, so big arms, to stand up when everyone else was sitting, to use strong words without caveats, so say I believe instead of I think, to avoid upspeak, which is where you finish a sentence on an up like this, and also to make sure that we were the first to talk, or one of the first to talk when we were sitting in a meeting room. The amazing thing was that it worked. So my question to you is, in a world where it's not quite as clear who scored the goal, what are you doing to prove your competence? Okay, so that brings me to point 2, which is remember to act on your badass tendencies. You do have it in you. About 2 years into my time at McKinsey, I was traveling nonstop and starting to think about the sustainability of a job where I was working regularly past midnight and pretty much every weekend. I was on a particularly difficult project where we were in this tiny, smelly team room until 3 a.m. most nights, doing a whole lot of work that I didn't think was enhancing the value for the client. I was ready to quit. And I told my mentor, who led the Southeast for McKinsey, that it just wasn't working for me. He asked me, what scenario would work for you? I told him I didn't know, but I'm sure whatever it is, it wouldn't fly. He said, the first thing you better do is figure out what does work and what will work, and then demand it. I told him, didn't see that going very well. He said, well, you just told me you were ready to quit. So why would you not give that a try? So the next day, I'm back in that team room, and I pack up my things at 6 p.m. I tell my team leader that, you know what, I really need some time to myself to recharge. These are the things I'm going to get done tonight, and I'll see you in the morning. He looked at me with shock, but I left. I finished those things by 8, sent them on, and I came back into the team room next day happy and recharged. So that day again, I packed up my things at 6, and one other team member joined me. By the end of the week, every single person, including that team leader, was packing up their stuff and ready to go. So I did something because I was at a crisis point, but I made things better for everybody in the process. An acquaintance of mine runs a business unit at Turner that was dying. She had a vision that could save the business, but the management team wasn't open to supporting it. She told them, if you want me to take this job, you will fund this fully. If I don't make my numbers, you fire me. She was prepared to retire if things didn't work, and is quick to say she would have never taken a stand like this earlier in her career. Her venture is now a bright spot in a difficult media business. And so then I ask you, what if we were more willing to take a stand on a regular basis? At my first board meeting with Kimberly-Clark, we had assigned seats. There was a main table where most of the conversation would occur, and then a number of seats around the outside of the room. I was seated on the outside, feeling disappointed, but I quietly walked to my seat. The CHRO walked over to me, gathered up my things for me, made room for me at the table, and told me never, ever, ever give up your rightful place at this table again, or any table. Why was I so willing to concede it? We women were bred to please. It makes it more difficult to say no when we're asked to take on a project, and more difficult to ask for something we need. But remember, who wins and who loses when you take on that project you didn't want that won't help you? You lose because you're reducing your available energy to have impact. Your family does because you're spending less time with them. And the person out there who actually wanted that project loses as well. So that brings me to point 3. Tell them what you did. Someone has to. This is the one that is by far the most uncomfortable for me. In school, grades are a great arbiter. Everyone faces the same rules for a test, and you're graded based on your performance on it. As you move from school to the business world, you tend to work closely with your boss, who is likely to have a pretty good handle on how well you're performing. The good bosses will trumpet your praises, and you can excel and even be promoted by keeping quiet. At some point, however, this will stop working. Your boss will be so busy you only interact with him once a month, or maybe he's even located across the world. Lots of people will be working on a project, so it's not always clear what you did. As you progress, either you tell them what you accomplished, or no one else will. I can think of hundreds of times I've been quiet or deflected when I shouldn't. I've always been a big believer that you should give credit to your team when they do good work and fight to let them speak to the work directly. While I still believe those things, I think those are critical components of great leadership. I didn't realize I wasn't saving any of the good stuff for myself until I heard about a discussion of my performance by my peers. We'd had a number of big wins on my team that I was proud of. The CFO said, "She's just fortunate to have some great talent on our team. They're good despite Allie." It took me a bit to get angry. I, of course, first had to examine my thoughts on whether she was right. But then I thought, wait a minute. I recruited every single person on my team. I directed all of their work. I gave them feedback on it. I brainstormed how to get to better answers, and I rolled up my sleeves and dug in when things weren't going well. How is this not my victory? But I was talking about myself as if I didn't matter, and therefore I was perceived that way. According to How Women Rise by Marshall Goldsmith and Sally Williamson, this is a common issue among women. We tend to deflect credit, not wanting to be seen as a braggart, and minimize our ambition instead of thoughtfully advocating for ourselves. It's unfortunately incredibly common that a male is given a promotion over a woman with better credentials because he seemed to want it more, has been talking about it, and is likely to leave if he doesn't get it. Guess what? It's not good for the company, for your future reports, or you that someone less qualified is getting promoted because you didn't speak up. Number 4, keep your cool. I've read a lot of articles about how women have to operate in a narrow band of emotion in the business world. You can't get angry or you're called hysterical. God forbid you cry or you're deemed too emotional. That's not the kind of cool I'm talking about here, though I happen to think that in most instances, a great, forceful, passionate, measured, steady argument that's not angry nor teary wins the day for both men and women. What I'm talking about here, though, is the ability to weather turbulence. If you're anything like me, you have a tendency towards perfectionism, a desire to please, and a habit for ruminating or dwelling on what went wrong. A male leader at a company I worked for once said about a friend of mine, when she's on, her work's an A+, but when she's off, she's an F. He could have been talking about me as well. When I'm not feeling good about an interaction, something I said, my boss's feedback for me, my performance in a meeting, I might end up thinking about it all night. By the next morning, I'm feeling exhausted and stuck with this pit of dread in my stomach. I go into the day less confident and more likely to have another interaction that I don't feel good about. I'm working hard on ruminating less. I have recently begun to practice mindfulness, which I'm really not very good at, but it seems to be helping. Yoga has been a great way to pause the negative cycle. I'm trying to analyze less and assume the best. I'm also very open to suggestions if anybody else has figured this out. And the 5th one, I think, is the most important and the most underutilized, is to enlist allies. My favorite business story of all time is one from McKinsey that happened well before I joined. These amazing female partners tell the stories of getting together right when they started and discussing that their odds of making partner at the time were 1 in 5 overall and 1 in 10 for women. The 4 of them, and they were the only 4 females in their associate class, decided they didn't like those odds very much, that likely none of them were going to make partner, and that they were going to do better. They were going to support each other no matter what. If one got invited to do something great, she would invite the others. If one was going to write an article, she was going to invite the others to share the byline and contribute to it. When one of them fell, the others would pick her up. All 4 of them made partner. The chief supply chain officer at Kimberly-Clark did something similar on our ELT. She built strong relationships with other women on the team by setting up dinners, trips, and gatherings that gave us true allies to get things done. I could have leveraged that group still more, but it was a wonderful source of information, support, and shaping of my work. As I've made the decision to invest more in building connections in Atlanta, I've been amazed by how naturally some people offer help and how quickly you can build allies and even lasting friendships. So to close and remind you about the 5 tips. First, recognize bias as unconscious. 2, be that badass that you are. 3, tell them what you did. 4, keep your cool. And 5, enlist allies.
Alison, phenomenal presentation. Really appreciate it. I have a question, on the tell them what you did. I think first off, I think a lot of this applies to men and women. I know particularly I have difficulty. We're taught always you're part of a team and that sort of thing. So when you tell them what you did, how do you balance that? Because you can't fly your flag constantly. We've all had bosses that take credit for our work. So how do you balance that, giving credit while, in your presentation, you said you hired all these people. And so it is the team, but you're part of that team as well. How do you balance that?
In no ways is this an argument not to give credit to the people who do the work and contribute to it. So I think that is where so many leaders fall down, and every one of us knows how bad it feels when somebody does that to you. It's the most demotivating thing you can do as a leader. But too many, I would say too many women, but there are absolutely, probably everything I've said resonates to men as well, and some men more than others, and some topics more than others. But too many people pass that credit on without taking any of it for themselves. So don't forget that you are one of those people that you need to comment on the great work that they did.
Great, thanks.
Allie, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. One thing that I've noticed in meetings is that when we're all sitting at the table, a lot of times the men will be probably 2 or 3 times as likely to talk over women than women are to talk over men. Can you talk about how you handle that when that happens to you?
Yes, that is a very difficult one. And I do think we have a little bit less room as women to be the ones that are always talking over others. It's noticed as bad behavior. That gravitas training that I talked about, one of the things that they do is encourage you to give signals that you're about to talk. Grab a pen in your hand and have it visibly floating in the room. Lean yourself into the table so that you're showing a posture that says, I'm trying to speak. Raise your hand. Do anything that physically gestures that you're trying to get your word in so that you're not having to do it by vocally talking over somebody. So that's a good way to do it. If those don't work, stand up. Just don't let yourself be ignored so that you have that potential to talk. I've been watching some of these Senate hearings recently, and another very effective thing to do is to keep your voice calm, but keep talking. Okay, I hear that you're talking over me. I'd really like a chance to say my piece. And you do it in a way that's not a battle, but you also don't let them off the hook. That's another way to do it. I would encourage you to watch people that come across really well and see how they're doing it, what they're doing to physically take up the space, what they're doing to vocally take up the space, and you'll come up with some really good tricks for how to capture that conversation. Yeah. I love the idea on anything you're working on, enlist men as well as women to be on your side to help you make gains on whatever a space is. I have not had that particular conversation on this topic though. Hey, can you help me make sure I get my words in?
Yeah.
I do think that would work. I haven't been part of it, but I'd love for somebody to try.
Yeah, I've offered. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But so,
it's interesting. There's that commercial, and now I'm forgetting what it is, but it's a woman suggests a big suggestion, and then nobody says anything, and then a man comes in after her and says exactly the same thing, and she said, "But you said the same thing I said, but you said it like this."
Right.
And there actually there are things that we're not doing to be heard sometimes. And that's whether you're a man or a woman. If you find that people aren't listening to your ideas and believing them, ask yourself, are you throwing out a caveat out front? Well, you might have already thought of this, but and then saying it? Are you making your body small as you suggested? Are you using upspeak on the back end of it? You may be unconsciously sending signals that say, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. And then someone comes in, I've got it. It's this. And everybody listens as if it's the idea that they can't wait for. It's unsurprising, if that was how it was presented in the first place, that it didn't get the same level of traction.
Thanks, Sally. I just have another question about the order in which you deliver information. I've heard that there are preferred orders in which people receive information. And I just wonder if you have a rule of thumb so that you've trained yourself a certain way when you're delivering information.
You know, it's interesting that women tend to use a lot more words in a day than men. And tend to connect a lot more through stories and small talk than men. And when you think about when you're presenting up to leadership, and particularly in med device, where I think it tends to be heavily male dominated, one of the biggest keys in my mind is being concise and getting to the point as quickly as possible. You can elaborate afterwards, but you got to set that direction really, really quickly. So I don't know that the order between those matters as much as you find a way to do it in 3 sentences right up front, and in a way that doesn't use a lot of words or stories in the process. Stories are actually very powerful, and I'm not saying don't use them, but use them as a way to elaborate and to give richness to what you've already shared.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing. Alison Lohr and Tiffany Wilson have agreed to do a little follow-up and some questions and comments. Tiff, are you? Can you unmute, or do I need to unmute you? Alison, you are unmuted, by the way.
Great. Hello, everyone.
Hey, there's Tiffany. All right, Alison, I'll let you take it away. And also, real quick, if you have comments you want to put into the chat that's in the bottom of your screen, please do that, and I can jump in with Alison and Tiffany. Or if you'd like to make a comment, just let us know. We'll probably do this for about 10 or 15 minutes, depending on questions and timing.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay? Maybe type into your chat window if you can hear me. I hear some typing. That's a good sign. Great. I'm so glad you guys could all join us for this webinar today, and I hope that you're getting a lot out of it. I felt like this was an important topic for us to address, and I hope you did as well. Tiffany is on the line with me and can help me answer any questions that you all have. I do want to also remind you that this is a webinar series that will be running for the next year. And so we don't have all of the topics already planned because we'd really like for you to be part of developing those topics. So please do feel free to add some into the chat window or follow up after the webinar with your suggestions. Jason, is the audience muted?
That might be me. I will mute myself, sorry.
I'm not sure if you guys can talk or raise your hands. Can you see the hands raised, Jason?
I can. I don't see any. If I may need to unmute if someone does want to say something, I can put it in the chat. I'm happy to unmute if they can't do it.
Okay, well, I will just make one comment while we're waiting for any remaining questions. One of the things that Madeleine Albright said once upon a time was, there is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And I loved what Alison Lohr mentioned about enlisting people to help. And so our medical device community here in the Southeast is not really that big, but it's a tight community. And I'd encourage you all to reach out every day and look for women who may need your help, and of course anyone who needs your help. But this particular series is geared toward women and the development of their careers within the medical device industry. So I just wanted to reach out to all of you and encourage you to help, to mentor younger people, to, if you are one of the younger, newer people to our profession, reach out to people and you can reverse mentor them.
So there is a question example. So I don't know, Allison or Tiffany, if y'all have some examples of when you've enlisted allies.
Allison, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, Tiffany.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I mean, I think that just through pulling together Medtech women at SEMDA and building and the advisory board, you know, was a way to kind of reach out to women across the Southeast who are leaders in their organizations and in this industry, to be able to provide guidance and input for different topics along the way. And then I think it's important to engage, you know, both men and women for kind of mentors in your career. Most of my mentors historically have been men, and it's been given me a opportunity to really kind of learn from that perspective and have people give me candid feedback on being a woman in this industry and how to communicate across both groups of men and women. You know, and then I think lastly, and this is particularly as I've gotten more senior in my career, you know, it becomes difficult as women. It's very kind of a lonely spot to be. So, you know, finding a group of a handful of trusted confidants that you can reach out to on tough situations, and, you know, kind of almost like a peer type group to help each other. It doesn't even have to be in the same industry. I think is highly valuable, and I encourage everyone to kind of build their tribe that way.
That's a great answer. I don't know, Allison, do you want to follow up on anything? Or?
Sure. Tiffany, that is a great answer. I couldn't agree more with you about mentors. Finding mentors in your career is one of the most enabling things, in my opinion. Finding good mentors. And you may have to test drive a few mentors, and mentors will come and go over the course of your career. But finding somebody who can and is willing to share their experience with you is really valuable. I'll also add a little plug about sponsors. At least in a larger organization, having what I would consider a sponsor has been really helpful for me at times, where you just have developed a relationship with somebody who isn't going to let it go if somebody mentions something that's either not true about you or doesn't put you in the best light. Somebody who is a true believer in what you do and how you do it. I can think of a lot of examples of people that I've had in my career who have stopped what could have been some kind of damage to my reputation by being a great sponsor. So I would just add that one point.
That's a great point. We did have, one suggestion is to have a session on gravitas training. I think that's a really interesting idea, Alison and Tiff. We'll follow up on that and discuss and see if we can work on something like that. Lee also asked, new to SEMDA, are there conferences or events that you would recommend? We just had our, unfortunately, you missed the Medtech Women event we had here in Atlanta on September 5th. We have another one in Memphis on November 7th. So if it's someplace that you go regularly and could make, that's our next in-person event. But SEMDA also has, we're partnering with RAPS and Georgia Bio for our December social. So certainly we can, have a MedTech Women kind of meetup as part of that if folks would like to do that. And we have fairly regular events like that throughout the year here in Atlanta, and trying to get out to other places if you're not here. So let's see. We have how to tactfully talk about our achievements, especially when negotiating promotions raise. That's a great question. Kay Perez, do you want to ask that question instead of me reading it? I don't know if you have the ability to talk, but I'm going to open your mic. If you don't want to, that's fine. But you're on if you want to. Let's see. I can't unmute her. So, okay. So the question was how to tactfully talk about our achievements, particularly when negotiating raises. Oh, are you on now? I don't know your first name. I'm sorry. Perez. All right. How to explain to men that I am supervising that they are actually not overachieving when they're just doing tasks in their job description, i.e. how to not come across as bitchy when giving feedback. So I'm going to take the second question on how to give men feedback. That I don't know if that's a millennial issue. I think that for me, I don't know. That's a really good question. Overachieving. I think my wife is a school teacher, and she talks about when parents will come to her and think that their child is gifted when they're really just smart. And the difference between a smart child who might get all A's and a gifted child is one that gets all A's, but then does things on their own that they've never been asked to do. And so to me, an overachiever is somebody that's getting their projects done, but then taking that next step. As far as the feedback, to me, it's being honest and saying, look, you're doing an awesome job. I mean, if they're actually asking, being overachiever, that's a tough one because that might be just a personality, but just honestly and open and listening to them, obviously, and then just saying, well, these are your expectations and you've met them, but then saying, how are you taking that next step? And that next step is, what it's going to take to be promoted and those sorts of things. I don't know, Alison or Tiff, do you have any other thoughts on that? Because that can be a tough one.
Yeah, sure. I'll be glad to jump in here. I think this is hard. I think giving people feedback is always touchy, and I always like to do it in a sandwich motion. So I give something positive, and then something less positive, and then close with something positive. I think if you truly value being fair, then you'll be able to deliver something fair that ultimately might feel painful at the time, but is respected in the long run. And I think that's what we all need to strive for. And I think as women, we are a little shy sometimes about providing that kind of feedback. I do think it's important to set expectations up front about what is expected. So in other words, if you achieve your goals, then you've done what you're supposed to do, and leave it at that. But be able to point out where you have overachieved your goals and make sure that the differentiation between achieving the goal and overachieving the goal is very clear. I hope that helps.
Okay, how have you all, Alice and Tiff, when talking to your boss about a raise, tactfully talk about your achievements when negotiating a raise?
So I just talk about them. I mean, I don't know. You're clear and factual about your achievements and kind of the value that it brings to the organization. I think you do that in a normal conversation, which is tactful. I don't really understand, I guess, the tact part.
I think so.
Kind of clear, honest communication.
Yeah, I think sometimes women are a little shy about presenting what they've done. And I think we have to get over that.
Yeah.
We do need to share our work, not in a braggy way, but in a way that points out what we've accomplished. Because a lot of times we will have accomplished a lot and we don't ever bring it to people's attention. And I think it's okay to say things like, I think this has been a great year for us. We got a webinar series set up. We had 20% more attendees at our annual meeting, and we raised 10% more than last year. And I'm really pleased that we achieved some of those goals, but here's how I think we can do better. So acknowledging the achievements, but then also setting up a new way that you can work together with your boss or your superior to move to the next level together, I think isn't maybe a way to do that.
Well, and I think sometimes, we have to be careful about using we, right? And so depending on, understanding who your boss is and what drives, how they think and evaluate what achievement and success is. Sometimes, particularly when interacting with men, you kind of just have to be very transparent about what you did. So I agree, Allison, in terms of, we accomplished these. It's been a great year for the organization, X, Y, and Z. This is specifically how I contributed and kind of what my wins were. And it does feel uncomfortable, but it is important. And, I'll kind of share just firsthand, if you're not specifically talking about your wins, nobody else is going to do it for you. And so just being very clear and direct, and it doesn't have to be a braggy way. It shouldn't be a braggy way, but what is braggy? So I think a lot of times as women, we think about talking about our achievements in and of itself is talking in a braggy way, and it's just not. I mean, you don't have to be a jerk about it, but you need to. People need to understand the value you bring.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that, so this is one that's hard for me, and like I said in my question to Ali, a lot of this applies to men as well. And when I was at two jobs ago, I decided I really wanted and thought I had earned a promotion. And so what I did is I wrote a memo, very factual, no emotion, no, I'm awesome, right? I mean, and I used that memo at first as more of a guideline to talk through with my boss why I felt that. And then I ended up turning it in, giving it to her as a request for a promotion because, I knew the organization did those sorts of reviews every year. And she ended up using that memo. She basically plagiarized my memo, put it in under her name, and put it in for a promotion. So, and there was one case in mine where I had led a project to rebrand the organization. It was the Biotechnology Industry Organization, and which really wasn't in my job description. And so it was pretty easy for me to do that and to have a lot of backup for my request. But putting it into a memo format and really taking out that, like, dang it, I deserve this kind of feeling, which I had, really helped me to be pretty even on it. So if helped me, if it helps you, at least put it into words. It's like writing that letter that you never intend to send, just to get it out there and get your brain clear. We do have one more question, but I know Tiffany has to go. Tiff, if you need to jump, that's fine. The question is, and if we'll make this the last one, how do you gain insight on how your work brings value to the organization if you're new to the role? I mean, my immediate response is that's your boss's job, is to help you understand where your the value that you bring. But I don't know, Tiff or Allison, how do you gain insight on your work bringing value to the organization, particularly when you're new?
Well, I think part of that, you should understand why someone's, why you're hired in the first place. Understanding, getting to know all the different stakeholders in your organization, but, listening to them. I'd spend a lot of time listening and kind of reflecting on where you can, not only do your job, but use your skill set to go above and beyond to add additional value. To your point, Jason, I think that is, someone's boss needs to do that. But then over time, really kind of tracking metrics, whether you're doing project work or launching a new technology, or, what are the success metrics around that? How does it tie to the P&L of the organization, or, whatever that may be. And then, keep track of that and communicate it.
Yeah, Tiffany, this is Allison. I agree with that. And while I do agree that it's your boss's job to help you to describe the benefits, I also think it helps your boss a lot if you do that for him or her. I had this conversation with my brother about a week ago, and he had accomplished something so big at work where he had automated something that turned a 2-day process into less than 5 minutes. And it used to take up a whole lot of resources and a whole lot of time. It was very inefficient. And I reinforced to him several times how important it is for him to quantify that for his boss. So go ahead and make some assumptions and say, we do this process 25 times over the course of a year. I'm going to assume that every employee gets paid whatever it is, $100 an hour. I saved the organization $297,000 or whatever it is. And if they want to disagree with your quantification, that's okay. They can disagree with your assumptions that built it, but still you're getting something quantitative and hard into your evaluation. And I do think that's important.
Oh, quantification. That's right to my heart there. Alison, Tiffany, and everybody who has remained, which we've had a lot of people remain on the Q&A, so really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone for joining today. As a reminder, we have the next one on November 2nd, which will be on kind of personal branding and using your whole self to promote what you're doing. I look forward to future webinars, and everyone have a great day and a great weekend. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, Al.
And thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.